At our housewarming party, Jessica announced she was giving away the keys to our dream home to her new boyfriend. The same house we'd spent 2 years planning, designing, and building together. The same house where we'd mapped out our entire future. She stood there in the living room we'd picked out together, holding those keys like a trophy, while everyone stared at me waiting for a reaction. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. I smiled, raised my glass of champagne, and said, "Congratulations, Jessica. I hope you both create beautiful memories there." Then I pulled out my phone and did something that made the entire room go silent. I transferred our shared photo album to her new boyfriend's email right there in front of everyone. 4 years worth of pictures, videos, and digital memories. Every vacation, every milestone, every intimate moment we'd captured together. "Consider it a housewarming gift," I said, calmly. "Since you're both starting fresh, you'll need some decoration for those empty walls." The silence in that room was deafening. Jessica's face went from triumphant to confused to absolutely horrified as she realized what I'd just done. Her new boyfriend, Derek, was already pulling out his phone, probably getting notifications as hundreds of our private moments landed in his inbox. The guests shifted uncomfortably, wine glasses frozen halfway to their lips. What nobody knew that night was that I'd been planning this moment for 3 months. Ever since I'd discovered Jessica's real intentions, I'd been carefully orchestrating what would become the most satisfying evening of my life. Let me take you back to where this really began. Jessica and I met during our senior year at the University of Colorado. She was studying marketing. I was finishing my business degree with a focus on real estate development. We were both ambitious, both driven, and both completely convinced we were destined for greatness. After graduation, we moved to Denver together and started building what we thought would be our empire. For the first 2 years, everything seemed perfect. I launched my development company, starting small with duplex renovations and gradually working my way up to larger commercial projects. Jessica landed a position at a high-end marketing firm that specialized in luxury brands. We were young, successful, and madly in love with our own potential. The house project started in year 3 of our relationship. We'd found this incredible lot in Cherry Hills Village, one of Denver's most prestigious neighborhoods. The land had been on the market for months because it required extensive foundation work due to the slope, which scared off most buyers. But I saw opportunity where others saw obstacles. Jessica was immediately obsessed with the idea. She spent weeks creating Pinterest boards, collecting magazine clippings, and sketching layouts. We'd drive out to the empty lot every weekend, standing there in the tall grass, pointing to where the kitchen would go, where we'd put the master bedroom, how we'd design the backyard for the children we planned to have someday. The planning phase lasted 6 months. Jessica insisted we hire the most expensive architect in Denver, a woman named Emma who specialized in modern mountain contemporary designs. I have to admit, Emma's work was impressive. She had this way of listening to what we wanted and then creating something even better than we'd imagined. The initial design featured floor-to-ceiling windows facing the mountains, an open-concept living area with a floating staircase, and a master suite that felt like a luxury hotel. Construction began the following spring. Every weekend, Jessica and I would visit the site, watching our dreams slowly take shape. She'd bring her camera and document every stage of the process: foundation pouring, framing, electrical, plumbing, drywall. She created albums labeled Our Forever Home and shared them constantly on social media. To everyone watching, we were the perfect couple building our perfect life. What I didn't know was that Jessica was also documenting everything for a completely different reason. The first sign something was wrong came during month 8 of construction. Jessica started working late more frequently, missing our weekend site visits. When I asked about it, she'd get defensive, claiming her company was launching a major campaign and she needed to prove herself. I believed her because I wanted to. When you're in love with someone, you make excuses for behavior that would otherwise seem obvious. The second sign was her sudden interest in the financial details of the project. Jessica had never cared about budgets or timelines before. But suddenly, she was asking detailed questions about costs, permits, and ownership structures. She wanted to know exactly how much I was investing, what the projected value would be upon completion, and how the property would be titled. I thought she was just excited about our investment. We'd talked about marriage, and I assumed she was thinking about our joint financial future. Looking back, I realized she was actually calculating her potential profit. The third sign should have been impossible to miss. But love makes you blind to the most obvious betrayals. Emma, our architect, started calling me directly instead of both of us. At first, I thought it was just professional courtesy since I was handling the payments. But then she mentioned that Jessica had asked her not to copy her on certain emails about design changes. When I confronted Jessica about this, she laughed it off. "You're better with the technical stuff," she said. "I trust you to handle those details." It seemed reasonable at the time. What I didn't know was that Jessica was already planning to cut me out of the decision-making process entirely. The revelation came on a Tuesday afternoon in November. I'd finished a site meeting early and decided to surprise Jessica at her office with lunch from her favorite restaurant. When I arrived, her assistant looked uncomfortable and said Jessica was in a meeting. Through the glass conference room door, I could see Jessica sitting across from a man I didn't recognize. They were looking at what appeared to be architectural drawings. I waited in the lobby for 20 minutes, but the meeting showed no signs of ending. Finally, I left the lunch with her assistant and drove back to my office. That evening, when I asked Jessica about her day, she mentioned nothing about any meetings or architectural plans. That's when I started paying attention. Over the next 2 weeks, I noticed Jessica was receiving phone calls she'd step outside to take. She was spending time on her laptop late at night, always closing it when I came near. She started asking strange questions about my business finances and whether I'd considered bringing in investors for future projects. The breakthrough came when I found a folder in Jessica's car labeled Property Transfer Documentation. Inside were legal documents I'd never seen before, including what appeared to be a quitclaim deed with my signature forged at the bottom. There were also photographs of every room in our nearly completed house and a professional appraisal report dated just 3 days earlier. I sat in that car for 30 minutes, reading through documents that detailed Jessica's plan to transfer ownership of our house to someone named Derek Morrison. The same Derek who turned out to be the man from her office meeting. The same Derek who, according to the paperwork, was prepared to pay Jessica a substantial sum for what he believed was her half of a property investment. That night, I didn't confront Jessica. Instead, I did something that went against every instinct in my body. I acted completely normal. I smiled when she talked about furniture shopping for the house. I nodded when she showed me pictures of dining room sets we might buy. I even helped her plan the housewarming party we'd discussed having once construction was finished. But while I was acting normal, I was also making plans. The first call I made was to Emma, our architect. I asked her to meet me at the construction site the next morning. When she arrived, I could tell she'd been expecting this conversation. "How long have you known?" I asked her straight out. Emma looked genuinely pained. "About 6 weeks," she said. "Jessica contacted me about transferring the architectural plans to a new owner. She said you two were splitting up and she was buying you out. And you believe that?" "I had no reason not to," Emma replied. She had all the project documentation, knew every detail about the design, and seemed to have legitimate authority to make changes. But when she asked me to remove your name from all future correspondence, something felt off. Emma explained that Jessica had been positioning herself as the primary client for weeks, making design decisions without my input, and requesting that all bills be sent to a new address. She'd even asked Emma to prepare a final report that would describe the house as Jessica's sole project. "Why didn't you call me?" I asked. "Because she said you already knew and were okay with it. She said you were focused on other projects and wanted her to handle the house completion." That conversation with Emma changed everything. I realized Jessica hadn't just been planning to leave me. She'd been planning to steal our house and profit from it. The man she was seeing wasn't just her new boyfriend, he was her buyer. Over the next month, I quietly gathered evidence of everything Jessica had done. I hired a private investigator who confirmed that Jessica and Derek had been meeting regularly for 3 months. I consulted with a lawyer who explained exactly how Jessica was attempting to defraud me. I even hired a forensic accountant who traced Jessica's recent financial activities. What I discovered was a scheme that was both brilliant and completely illegal. Jessica had been presenting herself to Derek as a successful real estate investor who was selling a luxury property she'd developed. She'd shown him the house, claiming she'd designed and financed it herself. Derek, who worked in tech and apparently had more money than sense, was prepared to pay Jessica $2 million for what he believed was a fully owned property in one of Denver's most exclusive neighborhoods. Jessica's plan was simple: convince Derek to buy the house, use forged documents to transfer the deed, take his money, and disappear. She'd already accepted a position with a marketing firm in Seattle and planned to move there immediately after the sale. The only problem with her plan was that she'd underestimated me completely. Instead of confronting her or involving the police, I decided to let Jessica continue with her scheme. But I made some modifications to her plan that she wouldn't discover until it was too late. Working with Emma, I arranged for the final construction phase to include some special additions that weren't on the original plans: hidden security cameras throughout the property, a home automation system that I could control remotely, and most importantly, a digital documentation system that would record every interaction that took place in the house. I also made sure that Derek's money would be going into an account that I had legal access to, thanks to some careful paperwork that Jessica had signed months earlier without reading carefully. The housewarming party was Jessica's idea. She wanted to show off the completed house to all our friends and family before making her big announcement. She planned to tell everyone that we were breaking up amicably and she would be keeping the house while I pursued other investments. What she didn't plan for was my own announcement. Standing in that living room, surrounded by everyone we knew, watching Jessica hand Derek the keys to our house, I felt nothing but calm satisfaction. Every person in that room was about to witness the conclusion of the most elaborate con game I'd ever played. And the best part was that Jessica still had no idea what was coming. When I transferred our shared photo album to Derek's email, I wasn't just being petty. Those photos contained metadata that proved I'd been the one financing and overseeing the house construction from the beginning. Every image included location data, timestamps, and financial records that demonstrated my sole ownership of the property. Derek's phone kept buzzing as hundreds of photos downloaded, each one containing evidence that the woman he'd just paid $2 million to was not who she claimed to be. But the photos were just the opening move. The real surprise was still coming. As Jessica began to realize what I'd done, her confident smile started to falter. She pulled me aside, away from the crowd of confused guests, and whispered urgently, "Marcus, what are you doing? This isn't funny." I looked at her with the same calm expression I'd been practicing for weeks. "You're right, Jessica. It's not funny at all. Fraud never is." The color drained from her face. "What are you talking about?" "I'm talking about the fact that you've just accepted $2 million for a house you don't own." Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us now. Back to the story. I'm talking about the forged documents in your car. I'm talking about Derek over there, who's currently looking at 4 years' worth of evidence that proves you've been lying to him about everything. Jessica's eyes darted around the room, looking for an escape route that didn't exist. Every guest was now staring at us, sensing that something significant was happening but not understanding what. "You can't prove anything," she said, but her voice was shaking. "Actually, I can prove everything," I replied. "Because unlike you, I've been planning this for months instead of making it up as I go along." That's when Derek approached us, his face pale and his phone still buzzing with incoming photos. "Jessica," he said quietly, "we need to talk." And that's when Jessica realized that her perfect plan had just become her perfect nightmare. Derek's conversation with Jessica lasted exactly 7 minutes. I know because I was timing it. 7 minutes for her entire elaborate scheme to crumble into pieces. When they finished talking, Derek walked straight to me while Jessica remained frozen by the kitchen island we'd selected together 9 months earlier. "I need to understand something," Derek said, his voice tight with controlled anger. "These photos show you at every stage of construction. Your signatures on permits, inspection reports, and contractor agreements. Jessica told me she built this house herself as an investment property." "That's interesting," I replied calmly. "What else did she tell you?" Derek's jaw clenched. "She said she was a successful real estate developer who specialized in luxury properties. She showed me financial projections, market analyses, even architectural awards she claimed to have won. I did my due diligence, Marcus. I researched everything she told me." "And what did your research show?" That Morrison Development Group, her supposed company, doesn't exist. The awards she showed me belong to other architects. The financial projections were fabricated. Derek's hands were shaking slightly. I gave her $2 million this afternoon. I nodded sympathetically. Jessica always was creative with the truth. You knew about this? I've known for 3 months. The question is, what do you want to do about it? Derek looked around the room, taking in the faces of our guests who were pretending not to listen to our conversation. Tyler, my best friend since college, was standing near the fireplace with the expression that suggested he was starting to piece things together. My father Robert was by the windows, watching Jessica with the sharp eyes of someone who'd spent 40 years in business and could smell a con from across the room. What I want, Derek said slowly, is my money back and an explanation of how you let this happen. That's when I realized Derek still didn't understand the full scope of what had occurred. He thought I was an innocent victim who'd been blindsided by Jessica's betrayal. He had no idea that I'd been orchestrating this entire evening for weeks. Derek, I said gently, let me ask you something. When you transferred that money to Jessica today, which account did it go to? Morrison Development Group's business account. She provided all the banking information. And did you verify that account independently? Derek's face went pale. She provided documentation showing her authorization to accept funds on behalf of the company. The company that doesn't exist. Yes. I pulled out my phone and showed Derek a banking app. Morrison Development Group is a business name. I registered 3 months ago. The account Jessica gave you belongs to me. The silence that followed was so complete, I could hear the grandfather clock in the hallway ticking. Derek stared at my phone screen, his face cycling through confusion, realization, and finally, pure rage. You're telling me that Jessica unknowingly had me transfer $2 million to you? That's exactly what I'm telling you. But how is that possible? She had all the account information, the routing numbers, everything. Because I gave her that information. 3 weeks ago I created fake Morrison Development Group letterhead and left it where Jessica would find it. When she saw it, she assumed I was planning to start a new company. She took photos of the documents, including the banking details, thinking she was stealing my business plan. Derek's voice was barely a whisper. She thought she was defrauding you, but she was actually following a script you wrote. Exactly. And the house? What about the deed transfer? I smiled. There is no deed transfer. Jessica forged my signature on a quitclaim deed that has no legal validity. She can't transfer property she doesn't own to begin with. This house is titled solely in my name and always has been. Derek sat down heavily in one of the dining room chairs Jessica had insisted we buy from a boutique in Cherry Creek. So I've paid $2 million for a house that isn't for sale to a woman who doesn't own it. You've paid $2 million as a voluntary gift to someone you barely know, with no legal documentation supporting any property transfer whatsoever. But she has to give it back, right? This is fraud. Is it? You willingly transferred money to someone based on claims you didn't verify. Jessica never forced you to do anything. She simply told you stories, and you chose to believe them without independent confirmation. Derek's business background was starting to catch up with his emotions. I could see him working through the legal implications, realizing that his position was far weaker than he'd initially understood. You set this up, he said finally. This whole thing was a trap. I created an opportunity for Jessica to reveal her true character. What she chose to do with that opportunity was entirely up to her. Derek looked across the room at Jessica, who was now sitting alone on the couch we'd spent 3 weekends shopping for. She was staring at her phone, probably trying to understand how her carefully planned evening had turned into a complete disaster. Why? Derek asked. Why go through all this instead of just reporting her to the police? Because reporting her to the police would have solved my problem but wouldn't have solved yours. What do you mean? Derek, Jessica didn't just decide to scam you last week. She's been planning this for months. She researched you, studied your background, learned about your tech company, and your recent acquisition exit. She knew exactly how much money you had available and tailored her entire approach to your specific situation. Derek's face was grim. You're saying I was targeted. I'm saying Jessica is very good at what she does. If it hadn't been you, it would have been someone else. The only difference is that someone else wouldn't have had advance warning about what they were walking into. And you're giving me advance warning by letting this play out publicly? I'm giving you the choice of how to handle this situation with full knowledge of what actually happened. Derek was quiet for several minutes, processing everything I'd told him. Around us, the party continued in a subdued fashion. Tyler had started quietly explaining the situation to other guests, and I could see the story spreading through the room in whispered conversations and shocked expressions. Emma, the architect, approached our table. "Marcus, I think I owe you an apology." "For what?" "For not calling you sooner when Jessica started making changes. I should have trusted my instincts that something wasn't right." "Emma, you were put in an impossible position. Jessica is very convincing when she wants to be." Emma glanced at Derek. "I'm Emma Patterson, the architect who designed this house. I worked with Marcus and Jessica for over a year on this project." Derek shook her hand. "You knew about the relationship between them?" "I knew they were partners in the project, yes. I also knew that Marcus was the sole financial backer and legal owner. When Jessica started asking me to remove Marcus from communications, I should have realized something was wrong." "What convinced you to go along with her requests?" Emma looked uncomfortable. "She told me that Marcus had become difficult to work with and was making unreasonable demands. She said he was trying to take credit for design decisions she'd made, and that their personal relationship was affecting their professional collaboration." "And you believed that?" "I didn't have any reason not to. Jessica was very knowledgeable about every aspect of the project. She could discuss architectural details, construction timelines, and material specifications with complete accuracy. It never occurred to me that she was learning those details in order to misrepresent her role later." Derek nodded slowly. "She did the same thing with me. Every conversation we had about real estate, every question I asked about construction or development, she had detailed answers. I thought I was talking to someone with years of experience in the industry." "You were," I said. "Jessica does have years of experience. She's been watching me work on projects for 4 years. She's attended client meetings, reviewed financial documents, and participated in design discussions. She genuinely understands the business." "But she's never actually run a project herself?" "She's never invested her own money, managed contractors, or taken legal responsibility for any development. She's been an observer and advisor, not a principal." Emma excused herself to join another conversation, leaving Derek and me alone. Again, I could see him working through the implications of everything he'd learned. "Marcus," he said finally, "I need to ask you something directly. Are you planning to keep my money?" "That depends." "On what?" "On what you do with the information I've given you." Derek's eyes narrowed. "Are you threatening me?" "I'm offering you a choice. You can treat this as a learning experience. That cost you $2 million. Or you can treat it as an investment in your future security." "I don't understand." "Derek, Jessica is going to continue doing this to other people. Tonight was just one evening in what will probably be a long career of sophisticated fraud. The question is whether you want to be the person who helps stop her or the person who quietly disappears and hopes she doesn't target your friends next." "What are you suggesting?" "I'm suggesting that we work together to document exactly what Jessica did, how she did it, and why it worked. We create a complete record of her methods, her lies, and her approach. Then we make sure that record is available to law enforcement and to any future victims." Derek was quiet for a long moment. "And in exchange?" "In exchange, you get your money back and the satisfaction of knowing you prevented other people from going through what you experienced tonight." "How do I know you'll actually return the money?" I pulled out my phone and opened the banking app again. "Because I'm going to transfer it back to you right now, in front of all these witnesses." Derek watched as I initiated a wire transfer for $2 million back to his account. The transaction confirmation appeared on my screen within seconds. "Why?" he asked. "You could have kept that money. Jessica committed fraud whether I get paid back or not. Because keeping your money would make me as bad as Jessica. The difference between her and me isn't that I'm smarter or more careful. The difference is that I don't steal from people. Derek's phone buzzed with a notification that the transfer had been received. He stared at the screen for a moment, then looked up at me with an expression I couldn't quite read. "You realize that Jessica is going to figure out what happened here?" "She already has." We both turned to look at Jessica, who was now standing by the front door with her purse and car keys. She was staring directly at us with an expression of pure hatred. "Gentlemen," she said loudly enough for the entire room to hear, "thank you for a lovely evening. Marcus, I'll be in touch through my attorney. Derek, I'm sorry you got caught up in this misunderstanding." With that, she walked out the front door, leaving behind a room full of stunned guests and a house that no longer held any trace of our shared dreams. Tyler approached our table once Jessica was gone. "Bro, what the hell just happened here? Jessica tried to sell our house to Derek without telling me." "And you knew about it?" "I've known for months." Tyler sat down and looked around the room. "So this entire party was a setup?" "This entire party was Jessica's idea. She wanted to publicly announce that she was keeping the house after our breakup. I just made sure that announcement included some additional information she wasn't expecting to share." "Such as?" "Such as the fact that she was committing fraud." Derek spoke up. "Marcus caught Jessica forging legal documents and planning to steal his property. Instead of reporting her immediately, he let her continue with her plan while secretly documenting everything she did." Tyler's eyes widened. "You mean Jessica actually thought she was going to get away with this?" "She did get away with it," I replied. "For about 7 minutes. But now what happens? She's gone, but she's still out there. She could try this again with someone else." Derek and I exchanged glances. "That's what we were just discussing," Derek said. "Marcus thinks we should work together to make sure law enforcement has everything they need to prevent Jessica from doing this to other people. And you're okay with that? Even though she tried to scam you? Especially because she tried to scam me. If Marcus hadn't been prepared for this, I would have lost $2 million and Jessica would have disappeared. The next person she targets might not be so lucky." Tyler nodded slowly. "So what's the plan?" "The plan," I said, "is to make sure Jessica's next victim has the same advantage Derek had tonight. Complete information about what they're walking into." "And how do we do that?" Derek answered. "We document everything. Every lie she told, every forged document she created, every detail of how she researched and targeted me. We create a complete profile of her methods and make sure it's available to anyone who might encounter her in the future." "Like a warning system?" "Like a comprehensive case study in sophisticated fraud that law enforcement can use to train other investigators." Tyler looked around the room again, taking in the beautiful house that had been the center of so much deception. "You know what the crazy part is? She actually helped create something amazing here. This house is incredible." "She did help create it," I agreed. "But she also tried to steal it. The difference is important." Emma rejoined our conversation. "Marcus, I have to ask, what are you going to do with the house now?" It was a question I'd been avoiding thinking about for weeks. The house was beautiful, functional, and exactly what Jessica and I had dreamed of building together. But it was also filled with memories of a relationship that had been built on lies and manipulation. "I honestly don't know," I said. "It doesn't feel like home anymore. Have you considered selling it?" "I've considered it. But I put 2 years of my life into this project. It's not just an investment property to me." Derek spoke up. "What if you found someone who would appreciate what you've built here? Someone who understands the work and planning that went into creating it?" "What do you mean?" "I mean that I spent 3 months researching this house, studying the design, and imagining what it would be like to live here. I know every detail of the construction, every feature of the layout, and every aspect of the neighborhood. I may have been deceived about who owned it, but I wasn't wrong about its value." I stared at Derek. "Are you suggesting what I think you're suggesting?" "I'm suggesting that I'm still interested in buying this house, from the actual owner this time, with proper documentation and legal representation." Tyler laughed. "This is insane. You want to buy the house from the guy who just exposed the woman who tried to scam you?" I want to buy the house from the guy who saved me from being scammed, Derek corrected. There's a difference. Emma looked fascinated. You know, that actually makes a lot of sense. Derek, you've already done all the research on the property value and neighborhood comparables. Marcus, you need to move on from this place emotionally. It could be a perfect solution for both of you. I considered the idea. Derek was right that he understood the value of what had been built here. He'd also proven that he was willing to take action when he discovered he'd been deceived, rather than just accepting the loss. Those were good qualities in a potential buyer. Derek, if we were to discuss this seriously, what kind of timeline would you be thinking about? Honestly, I'd like to move forward as quickly as possible. I've already secured financing, obviously, and I've done extensive due diligence on the property itself. The only thing that needs to change is the identity of the seller. And you're comfortable moving forward after everything that happened tonight? Derek smiled for the first time all evening. Marcus, tonight you could have kept my money and let me figure out the fraud on my own. Instead, you returned my money and offered to help me document what happened so other people won't get scammed. That tells me everything I need to know about your character. I looked around the room one more time, taking in the space that Jessica and I had created together. The soaring ceilings, the mountain views, the carefully chosen finishes that we'd debated for hours. It was a beautiful house, but it was no longer our house. Maybe it was time to let someone else make it their home. All right, I said finally. Let's talk. The negotiations between Derek and me took place over the following week at Emma's architecture firm in the Rhino district. Her converted warehouse office felt like neutral territory, and Emma's presence helped keep our discussions focused on practical matters, rather than the emotional complexity of the situation. Derek proved to be remarkably thorough in his approach to the legitimate purchase. He hired his own inspector, appraiser, and real estate attorney, insisting on treating the transaction exactly as he would any other major property acquisition. I respected that level of caution, especially given what he'd just experienced with Jessica. I want to make sure we both feel completely comfortable with every aspect of this deal, Derek explained during our second meeting. No surprises, no hidden conditions, no informal agreements that aren't documented. His attorney, a sharp woman named Catherine Wells, had obviously been briefed on the background situation. She spent considerable time reviewing the property, title, construction permits, and contractor agreements to verify that I had clear ownership and legal authority to sell. Mr. Morrison, she said during our third meeting, I need to ask directly about any potential claims your former partner might have on this property. Jessica has no legal claim to the house, I replied. She never contributed financially to the purchase, construction, or carrying costs. Her name appears nowhere on any official documentation. But she was involved in the design and planning process? She was involved as my partner, yes, but involvement doesn't create ownership. Rights. I consulted with my own attorney before we started these discussions to make sure there were no potential complications. Catherine nodded. And the forged documents we've heard about? I have copies of everything Jessica created, along with documentation proving the forgeries. That evidence has been turned over to the Denver District Attorney's Office. Derek looked up from the inspection report he'd been reviewing. Have you heard anything from the DA about potential charges? They're still reviewing the case. Financial fraud investigations take time, especially when they involve sophisticated schemes like Jessica's. Emma interjected from her position at the drafting table where she was reviewing the original house plans. I've been contacted by the DA's office as well. They want to interview me about Jessica's attempts to misrepresent her role in the project. Are you comfortable with that? Derek asked. Absolutely. What Jessica did wasn't just fraud against you and Marcus. It undermines the integrity of the entire architectural profession. If clients can't trust that the people they're working with are who they claim to be, it damages everyone in the industry. Catherine was taking notes throughout this conversation. Mr. Morrison, from a legal standpoint, I'm comfortable advising my client to proceed with this purchase. The title is clear, the property is properly documented, and there are no outstanding liens or encumbrances. What about the purchase price? Derek asked. I want to make sure we're both getting a fair deal. We'd been dancing around this question for several days. The house was worth approximately $2.8 million based on recent comparable sales in Cherry Hills Village. Derek had originally been prepared to pay Jessica $2 million for what he thought was a fully furnished property with clear title. The fair market value is $8 million, I said. But given the unusual circumstances of how we met and your willingness to help with the Jessica situation, I'd be comfortable with $5 million. Derek shook his head. Marcus, I appreciate the gesture, but I want to pay full market value. This needs to be a completely legitimate transaction that benefits both of us appropriately. Derek, you're buying a house that comes with some complicated history. That should be reflected in the price. The history is exactly why I want to pay full price. I'm not just buying a house from you. I'm buying peace of mind, a clean transaction, and the knowledge that we're both walking away from this situation as equals. Emma looked up from her plans. You know, there might be a compromise that works for both of you. What do you mean? I asked. Derek, you mentioned wanting to make some modifications to the master bathroom and kitchen layout. Marcus, you have established relationships with all the contractors who worked on the original construction. What if the purchase price reflects the current condition, but Marcus provides assistance with any modifications Derek wants to make? Derek considered this suggestion. That actually makes a lot of sense. I'd be getting the benefit of Marcus's experience and contractor relationships, which has real value. And I'd be ensuring that any changes to the house are done properly, I added. I put too much work into this place to see it damaged by poor craftsmanship later. Catherine was already making notes about how to structure this arrangement. We can include a consulting agreement as part of the purchase contract. Marcus provides design and contractor coordination services for any modifications Derek wants to make during the first year after closing. What would be fair compensation for that kind of consulting? Derek asked. How about we structure it as a credit against the purchase price? I suggested. You pay $8 million, but I provide up to $300,000 worth of consulting services. That way you're paying full market value, but you're getting additional value that reflects our unique situation. Derek smiled. I like that approach. It's clean, it's fair, and it gives us both incentive to make sure the consulting arrangement works well. Emma was already sketching out ideas for the bathroom modifications Derek had mentioned. This could actually be a really interesting collaboration. Derek, you have some great ideas for optimizing the space, and Marcus knows exactly how the existing systems are designed. Over the next hour, we outlined the basic terms of what would become a surprisingly complex but mutually beneficial arrangement. Derek would purchase the house at full market value, but I would provide ongoing consulting services that would allow him to customize the property to his specific needs. More importantly, we formalized our agreement to cooperate fully with law enforcement regarding Jessica's fraud attempt. Catherine drafted a detailed timeline of events, including Derek's initial contact with Jessica, the documents she provided, and the methods she used to misrepresent herself. This documentation could be valuable not just for prosecuting Jessica, Catherine noted, but for educating other potential victims about sophisticated fraud schemes. Derek was reviewing the timeline when he stopped at a particular entry. Marcus, there's something I haven't told you about how Jessica first approached me. What do you mean? I mean that our initial meeting wasn't accidental. She researched me extensively before making contact. Emma and I both looked up from our respective documents. How extensively? Emma asked. Derek pulled out his phone and showed us a series of screenshots. After tonight's revelation, I went back through all my interactions with Jessica. She knew details about my business, my recent acquisition exit, and my personal interests that weren't publicly available. Such as? She knew I'd been looking at properties in Cherry Hills Village specifically. She knew I was interested in modern architecture and mountain views. She even knew I'd recently ended a long-term relationship and was living alone. I felt a chill run down my spine. Derek, how could she have known those things? I think she was monitoring my online activity somehow. My real estate searches, my social media interactions, maybe even my email communications with realtors. Catherine looked alarmed. That would suggest a level of sophistication that goes well beyond simple fraud. If Jessica was conducting digital surveillance on potential targets, we're talking about potential federal crimes. Emma was staring at Derek's phone. Do you still have the original communications she sent you? Everything. Emails, text messages, even voicemails she left. We need to turn all of that over to law enforcement immediately, Catherine said. If Jessica is systematically targeting and surveilling potential victims, there could be other people who've been affected. Derek nodded grimly. I've been thinking the same thing. The level of detail she had about my situation suggests she'd been watching me for weeks or months before making contact. Which means she's probably done this before, I realized. Jessica didn't just decide to become a sophisticated fraudster overnight. She's been developing these skills and techniques over time. Emma was looking thoughtful. Marcus, think back over the past year. Were there any other situations where Jessica seemed to know things she shouldn't have known? Details about your business dealings, your clients, your financial situation? I considered the question carefully. Actually, yes. There were several times when Jessica made comments about my projects or clients that seemed unusually well-informed. I assumed she was just paying attention to my work. But what if she was doing more than just paying attention? What if she was actively researching your business contacts and financial activities? The implications of what Emma was suggesting were staggering. If Jessica had been conducting surveillance on me as well as Derek, our relationship might have been built on deception from the very beginning. Derek, I said slowly. When Jessica first contacted you, did she mention knowing me personally? She said she was a real estate developer who'd worked on similar projects in the area. She mentioned that she knew other people in the Denver development community, but she didn't specifically name you. So she didn't present herself as my partner? Not initially. It was only later, when she was showing me the house, that she mentioned having a business partner who was no longer involved in the project. Catherine was taking rapid notes. This suggests Jessica was maintaining separate identities and storylines for different aspects of her scheme. To you, Marcus, she was the supportive partner. To Derek, she was the independent developer. The question is, how many other people was she deceiving simultaneously? Emma had been listening to this conversation with growing concern. There's something else we should consider. If Jessica was conducting digital surveillance on Derek, she probably has similar information about other potential targets. You mean there could be other people she's planning to scam? I mean there could be other people she's currently in the process of scamming. The room fell silent as we all contemplated this possibility. Jessica's scheme against Derek had been months in the making, involving detailed research and careful preparation. If she was operating at that level of sophistication, it was unlikely that Derek was her only target. Derek broke the silence. We need to figure out how to identify other potential victims before they get in too deep. How do we do that? I asked. Catherine answered. We work with law enforcement to trace Jessica's digital activities. Email accounts, social media profiles, online search histories. If she's been researching multiple targets, there will be digital evidence. And what about warning people directly? Emma asked. If we can identify specific individuals who might be at risk, shouldn't we reach out to them? That's more complicated, Catherine replied. We need to be careful not to interfere with an ongoing investigation or to accidentally alert Jessica that we're tracking her activities. Derek was scrolling through his phone again. Actually, there might be a way to do both. Jessica connected with me through a real estate networking group on social media. If she's using the same approach with other targets, they'd be members of the same groups. You're thinking we could post a general warning without mentioning Jessica specifically? I asked. I'm thinking we could share information about sophisticated fraud schemes in general, including the specific tactics Jessica used. Anyone who's being targeted by similar methods would recognize the warning signs. Emma nodded enthusiastically. That's brilliant. We create an educational post about red flags to watch for when dealing with unfamiliar real estate developers. Catherine looked less convinced. We'd need to be very careful about how we word that kind of warning. We can't make specific accusations without proof, and we don't want to tip off Jessica that we're actively working against her. What if we approach it as a public service announcement? Derek suggested. Recent fraud attempt in the Denver area. Here are the warning signs. Contact law enforcement if you've experienced anything similar. That could work, Catherine agreed. As long as we stick to factual information and don't identify Jessica by name. Over the next 2 hours, We crafted a carefully worded warning that described Jessica's methods, without revealing specific details that might compromise the investigation. Derek posted it to several real estate networking groups, and Emma shared it through professional architecture forums. The response was immediate and alarming. Within hours, Derek was receiving private messages from 3 different people who reported being contacted by someone matching Jessica's description. 2 of them had already provided financial information to their supposed developer contact. "This is bigger than we thought," Derek said as he showed us the messages. "Jessica isn't just running 1 or 2 scams. She's operating a systematic fraud operation targeting multiple victims simultaneously." Catherine was already on the phone with the district attorney's office, updating them on what we'd discovered. When she finished the call, her expression was grim. "The DA wants to meet with all of us tomorrow morning. They're escalating this to their white-collar crime division and potentially involving federal authorities." Emma looked overwhelmed. "Federal authorities? What have we gotten ourselves into?" "We've uncovered what appears to be an organized fraud operation," I replied. "The question is, how long has Jessica been doing this, and how many people has she targeted?" Derek was still reading through the messages he'd received. "Based on these responses, I'd say we're looking at potential victims across multiple states. Some of these people are describing interactions that go back 6 months or more. Which means Jessica was planning and executing multiple scams while she was still living with you," Catherine pointed out. The realization hit me like a physical blow. Jessica hadn't just betrayed me at the end of our relationship. She'd been betraying me throughout our relationship, using our shared life as cover for an extensive criminal operation. "Marcus," Emma said gently, "are you okay?" "I'm fine," I lied. "I'm just trying to process the scale of what we've discovered." Derek closed his phone and looked at me seriously. "Marcus, I want you to know that whatever Jessica was doing behind your back, it doesn't change my opinion of this house deal or our collaboration." "I appreciate that, Derek. But I have to wonder what else I missed. If Jessica was running scams, on this scale, there must have been signs I should have noticed. Or maybe there weren't," Catherine said. "Sophisticated criminals are skilled at compartmentalization. Jessica probably kept her fraudulent activities completely separate from her relationship with you." Emma nodded in agreement. "Marcus, you caught her in the end. You figured out what she was doing and set up a plan to expose her. That suggests your instincts were working fine." "But how many people got hurt while I was missing the signs?" Derek answered firmly. "That's not your responsibility. Jessica made the choice to commit fraud. You made the choice to stop her when you discovered it. The difference is important." As we wrapped up our meeting, I found myself thinking about the house that had started this entire sequence of events. What had begun as a simple real estate transaction had evolved into a complex investigation of organized fraud, but it had also evolved into something positive. Derek and I had formed an unlikely partnership based on mutual respect and shared purpose. Emma had become an integral part of both the house transaction and the fraud investigation. Even Catherine, despite her initial skepticism, had become invested in seeing justice served. "You know," Derek said as we prepared to leave Emma's office, "when I first decided to buy a house in Denver, I thought I was just making a smart investment. I never imagined I'd end up helping to expose a criminal organization. And when I decided to build this house," I replied, "I thought I was creating a home with someone I loved. I never imagined I'd end up selling it to someone who helped me understand what love actually looks like." Emma smiled. "What do you mean?" "I mean that Derek has shown me more loyalty and integrity in 1 week than Jessica showed me in 4 years. Real partnership isn't about grand gestures or romantic declarations. It's about doing the right thing even when it's difficult or expensive." Derek extended his hand. "Partners?" I shook it firmly. "Partners." The morning meeting with the district attorney's office took place in a sterile conference room downtown that smelled of stale coffee and bureaucratic tension. Detective Maria Santos from the white-collar crime division was already seated when we arrived, surrounded by manila folders and a laptop that looked like it had seen better years. "Mr. Morrison," Detective Santos said as she shook my hand, "I've been reviewing your case file. What started as a simple fraud complaint has become something much more complex." Derek, Catherine, Emma, and I took seats around the scarred conference table while Detective Santos opened her laptop. The screen displayed a network diagram that looked like something from a crime television show, with Jessica's photo at the center and lines connecting to at least a dozen other individuals. Based on the information you provided and our own investigation, we've identified 14 potential victims across 5 states, Detective Santos continued. The scheme your ex-partner was running appears to have generated over $8 million in fraudulent transactions during the past 18 months. The number hit me like a sledgehammer. $8 million. While I'd been planning what I thought was our future together, Jessica had been systematically destroying other people's financial security. How is that possible? Emma asked. We're talking about someone who was living a normal life, attending dinner parties, helping plan a house construction project. Detective Santos turned her laptop screen toward us. Ms. Carter maintained multiple identities and operated several fake business entities. Morrison Development Group, which she used to target Mr. Jenkins here, was just one of 6 fictional companies she created. Derek leaned forward to study the diagram. What were the others? Summit Ridge Architects, targeting people interested in custom mountain homes. Aspen Valley Investments, focusing on commercial real estate opportunities. Rocky Mountain Land Trust, specializing in undeveloped property sales. The list goes on. Catherine was taking notes furiously. And she was managing all of these simultaneously? Ms. Carter appears to have been highly organized in her criminal activities. We found detailed spreadsheets tracking each victim's financial profile, timeline of contact, and projected profit potential. She was essentially running fraud as a full-time business. I felt sick. Detective Santos, I lived with Jessica for 4 years. How did I not notice any of this? Mr. Morrison, sophisticated white-collar criminals often maintain completely separate operational lives. Ms. Carter rented office space under false names, used multiple phones and email accounts, and conducted most of her criminal activity during hours when you believed she was at her legitimate job. But her legitimate job was in marketing. How did she have time for all this other activity? Detective Santos consulted her notes. According to our investigation, Ms. Carter was terminated from her marketing position 8 months ago for falsifying client reports and misappropriating company resources. The conference room fell silent. 8 months ago, Jessica had been coming home every evening with stories about her challenging projects and difficult clients. She'd been complaining about long hours and demanding deadlines. All of it had been lies. She was unemployed for 8 months, I said slowly. And I never knew. She maintained the appearance of employment by leaving the house each morning and returning at typical work hours. We believe she was using that time to research targets, meet with potential victims, and manage her various fraudulent enterprises. Derek looked stunned. So while she was telling me she was a successful real estate developer, she was actually unemployed and running multiple scams? Exactly. And while she was telling Mr. Morrison she was busy with marketing campaigns, she was actually developing increasingly sophisticated methods of financial fraud. Emma raised her hand tentatively. Detective Santos, what does this mean for the people who've been victimized? Are they going to recover their money? That's complicated. Some of the fraudulent transactions can be reversed through banking and credit card protections. Others, particularly those involving cash transfers or cryptocurrency, may be permanent losses. Catherine looked up from her notes. What's the total amount of unrecoverable losses? Preliminary estimates suggest approximately $2 million in funds that cannot be directly recovered through normal channels. The weight of that number settled over the room like a heavy blanket. Jessica's crimes hadn't just affected Derek and me. She'd destroyed the financial security of families, retirees, and small business owners who trusted her with their life savings. There's something else, Detective Santos continued. We have reason to believe Ms. Carter was planning to escalate her operations significantly. What do you mean? I asked. We found evidence that she was researching international real estate, markets, and offshore banking procedures. If she hadn't been exposed, we believe she was preparing to expand her fraud operations globally and then disappear with the proceeds. Derek's face was grim. So the house scam was just the beginning? The house scam appears to have been her exit strategy from the Denver market. She was planning to take your $2 million, liquidate any remaining local assets, and relocate to Europe where she'd already begun establishing new false identities. I thought about the woman I'd shared a bed with for 4 years, the woman who'd helped me choose bathroom fixtures and kitchen appliances, the woman who'd kissed me goodbye every morning before leaving for what I thought was her job. That woman had been planning to steal everything she could and disappear forever. Detective Santos, Catherine said. What's the timeline for arrest and prosecution? We executed a search warrant on Ms. Carter's storage unit this morning. We recovered computers, financial documents, and evidence of additional fraudulent activities we hadn't previously identified. Storage unit? I asked. What storage unit? Ms. Carter rented a commercial storage facility under one of her false identities. She was using it as essentially a criminal headquarters. Multiple computers, filing cabinets full of victim profiles, and sophisticated equipment for creating fraudulent documents. Emma looked horrified. She had a whole secret operation that none of us knew about. The sophistication level is remarkable, Detective Santos agreed. Ms. Carter invested significant time and resources into developing professional-quality fake documents, websites, and business materials. This wasn't amateur hour fraud. This was organized crime. Derek was studying the network diagram again. Detective, what happens to the victims who can't recover their money? We're working with federal prosecutors to pursue asset forfeiture and restitution orders. Any property or funds Ms. Carter acquired through criminal activity can potentially be seized and distributed to victims. Including the money she stole from legitimate relationships? I asked. Detective Santos looked at me carefully. Mr. Morrison, did Ms. Carter have access to your business accounts or personal finances? She had access to our shared household accounts, but not to my business finances. Why? Because we found evidence that she was skimming money from shared accounts in multiple relationships. If she took funds from accounts you both had access to, those could be considered theft rather than shared expenses. The implications of what Detective Santos was suggesting made my head spin. Jessica hadn't just been planning to steal from Derek and her other fraud victims. She'd been stealing from me throughout our relationship. How much money are we talking about? I asked. We're still analyzing the financial records, but preliminary evidence suggests approximately $180,000 in unauthorized withdrawals from accounts associated with your relationship. I sat back in my chair, trying to process this information. $180,000. Money I'd assumed was being spent on our shared life together had actually been funding Jessica's criminal activities. There's more, Detective Santos continued. We believe Ms. Carter was using information from your business relationships to identify and research potential fraud targets. What kind of information? Client lists, financial data, project details. She appears to have been mining your professional network for wealthy individuals who might be susceptible to real estate fraud. Derek looked at me with sympathy. Marcus, she was using your success and reputation to make herself credible to potential victims. Including me, Derek added. When she first contacted me, she mentioned knowing people in the Denver development community. I assumed she meant professional colleagues, but she probably meant you specifically. Detective Santos nodded. Ms. Carter's approach to Mr. Jenkins was sophisticated partly because she had insider knowledge about legitimate real estate development practices. She learned those practices by observing Mr. Morrison's business operations. The betrayal felt complete. Jessica hadn't just stolen money and property. She'd stolen my professional knowledge, my business relationships, and my reputation to commit crimes against innocent people. Detective Santos, Catherine said, when do you expect to make arrests? We're coordinating with federal authorities because the crimes cross state lines. Ms. Carter should be in custody within the next 48 hours. And what about the other victims? How are they being notified? We're working with local law enforcement in each jurisdiction to contact victims directly. Some of them don't yet realize they've been defrauded because Ms. Carter's schemes were designed to delay discovery of the theft. Emma asked the question I'd been afraid to voice. What's going to happen to Jessica when she's arrested? Given the scale and sophistication of her criminal activities, Ms. Carter is likely facing federal charges for wire fraud, mail fraud, identity theft, and money laundering. If convicted on all counts, she could be sentenced to 25 years in federal prison. 25 years. The woman who'd spent 4 years sharing my life could spend the next 25 years in prison. despite everything she'd done, despite the people she'd hurt. The magnitude of that consequence felt overwhelming. "Mr. Morrison," Detective Santos said gently, "I know this is a lot to process. You were as much a victim of Ms. Carter's deception as anyone else. The fact that you lived with her doesn't make you responsible for her crimes. But I should have seen the signs. All those late nights, all those mysterious phone calls, all those times she seemed to know things she shouldn't have known." Derek spoke up firmly. "Marcus, Jessica fooled all of us. She fooled me. She fooled Emma. She fooled professional investigators who specialize in fraud detection. The only reason any of us discovered the truth was because you were smart enough to set a trap when you finally realized something was wrong." Detective Santos gathered her papers. "Mr. Morrison, we're going to need you to provide detailed financial records for the entire period of your relationship with Ms. Carter. We'll also need access to any communications, emails, or documents that might help us understand the full scope of her criminal activities. Of course, whatever you need. And Mr. Jenkins, your cooperation in documenting Ms. Carter's approach and methods has been invaluable. The information you provided helped us identify several other victims who might never have been discovered otherwise." Derek nodded. "I'm glad something positive came out of this mess." As we prepared to leave the conference room, Detective Santos handed each of us her business card. "This investigation is going to continue for several months. Please contact me immediately if Ms. Carter attempts to reach any of you or if you remember any additional information that might be relevant." Walking out of the building into the bright Denver sunshine felt surreal. The world looked the same as it had when we'd entered the meeting, but everything had changed. Jessica wasn't just my ex-partner who'd tried to commit fraud. She was a career criminal who'd been living a double life for years. Derek walked beside me quietly for several blocks before speaking. "Marcus, how are you holding up?" "Honestly, I don't know. I keep thinking about all the times Jessica came home complaining about her job, and now I know she didn't even have a job. I keep thinking about all the evenings we spent together planning our future, and now I know she was planning to steal everything and disappear. But she didn't disappear. You caught her. Only because I got lucky. If I hadn't found those documents in her car, she might have succeeded." Emma, who'd been listening to our conversation, stopped walking. "Marcus, it wasn't luck. You paid attention when things didn't add up. You investigated when you had suspicions. You planned a response that protected both yourself and Derek. That's not luck. That's intelligence and integrity." "Emma's right," Derek added. "Jessica may have fooled you for a while, but when it mattered most, you chose to do the right thing, even though it would have been easier to just walk away." I looked back at the building where we'd just learned the full scope of Jessica's crimes. 14 victims across 5 states. $8 million in fraudulent transactions, 25 years in federal prison. "You know what the strangest part is?" I said finally. "What?" "I still love the house we built together. Despite everything she did, despite all the lies and betrayal, I'm still proud of what we created there." Derek smiled. "That's because the house represents the best parts of who you are, not the worst parts of who she was. When I move in next month, I'm not going to be living in Jessica's fraudulent scheme. I'm going to be living in Marcus's vision of what a home should be. And that vision," Emma added, "is something Jessica could never steal, no matter how many crimes she committed." 3 months later, I stood in the driveway of what was now Derek's house, watching him unload boxes from a moving truck. The cherry trees we'd planted were beginning to bloom, and the mountain views looked exactly as spectacular as Jessica and I had imagined they would. Derek emerged from the truck, carrying a carefully wrapped painting. "Marcus, I know you said you wanted all traces of the old life removed, but are you sure about the artwork? Some of these pieces are incredible." "Keep whatever speaks to you," I replied. "Those memories belong to the house now, not to me." Emma joined us from inside, where she'd been supervising the installation of Derek's home office. "The internet setup is complete, and the security system is fully operational. You're officially moved in." Derek set down the painting and looked around the property. "You know, when I first saw this place through Jessica's lies, I thought I was buying an investment. Now I realize I was actually buying a home. That's what it was always meant to be, I said. Jessica may have tried to steal it, but she could never steal the intention behind it. Emma pulled out her phone to show us photos from that morning's news. Speaking of Jessica, the sentencing was finalized today. 18 years in federal prison, plus full restitution to all identified victims. 18 years, Derek repeated quietly. That's a long time to think about the choices she made. It's also long enough for all of her victims to rebuild their lives, I pointed out. Some of those people lost their retirement savings because of what she did. Emma nodded grimly. The elderly couple in Phoenix lost $400,000. The young family in Seattle lost their down payment for their first home. Jessica didn't just steal money. She stole dreams. Derek was studying the photo of Jessica being led away in handcuffs. Do you ever wonder what made her think she could get away with it? I think she got away with smaller things for so long that she started believing she was untouchable, I replied. The fake job, the skimmed money, the forged documents. Each successful deception made her more confident about attempting bigger crimes. Until she tried to defraud someone who was prepared to fight back, Emma added. Actually, Derek said, until she tried to defraud someone whose partner was prepared to fight back. If Marcus hadn't been paying attention, I would have lost everything, and Jessica would have disappeared to Europe. I thought about that alternate timeline. Jessica living in some Mediterranean villa, spending Derek's money while her other victims struggled to recover from their losses. The image made me grateful for the way things had actually unfolded. Derek, I have something for you, I said, pulling an envelope from my jacket. The final architectural drawings Emma created for your office modifications, plus the warranty information for all the home systems. Derek opened the envelope and smiled. These designs are incredible. Emma, you've managed to make the space even better than the original plans. That's because I understand how Derek actually works, rather than trying to impose someone else's vision on the space, Emma replied. Real collaboration produces better results than manipulation every time. Speaking of collaboration, Derek said, I have some news to share. The business partnership we discussed has been approved by my board of directors. I looked at him with surprise. You're serious about moving forward with the development ventures? Marcus, in 3 months of working together, you've shown me more integrity and business acumen than I encountered in 4 years of previous partnerships. Why wouldn't I want to formalize that relationship? Emma was grinning. You two are going to make an incredible team. Derek's technology background and Marcus's construction expertise could revolutionize sustainable development in Colorado. Plus, Derek added, we both have experience detecting and preventing fraud. That's valuable expertise in any business relationship. I shook Derek's hand firmly. Partners? Partners. Emma raised her coffee cup in a mock toast. To partnerships built on honesty instead of deception. To homes that represent hope instead of schemes, Derek added. To futures that belong to the people who build them, I concluded. As we stood there on the front porch of the house that had caused so much drama and revealed so much truth, I felt a sense of completion that had nothing to do with construction timelines or real estate transactions. Jessica had tried to steal our future and profit from our past, but she'd actually given us something much more valuable. She'd given us the opportunity to discover what authentic partnership looked like. Derek was already making plans for a housewarming party to introduce himself to the neighbors. Emma was sketching ideas for the sustainable development projects we'd discussed. I was thinking about the other properties I'd identified as potential collaboration opportunities. Marcus, Derek said as we prepared to leave, I want you to know that this house will always be a reminder of what happened when good people decided to stand up to someone who was hurting others. And Jessica? I asked. Jessica will always be a reminder that actions have consequences, even when you think nobody's watching. Emma locked the front door and handed Derek the keys. Welcome home. Driving away from Cherry Hills Village, I realized that Jessica had been wrong about one fundamental thing. She'd believed that giving Derek our future house would secure her escape and profit. Instead, it had secured her imprisonment and our success. The past belonged to memories now. and the future belonged to people who'd earned it honestly. 6 months later, Derek, Emma, and I celebrated the groundbreaking of our first joint development project. The sustainable housing complex would provide affordable homes for young families, exactly the kind of people Jessica had targeted and betrayed. "You know," Emma said as we posed for photos with the local mayor. Jessica thought she was so smart, planning that elaborate fraud scheme. But she never considered that her actions might inspire something better. Derek nodded toward the construction site. 48 families are going to have homes because we learned to work together after stopping her crimes. And hundreds of people avoided being scammed because we shared information about her methods, I added. She gave us our past as a memory, Derek said thoughtfully. But we gave ourselves our future as a reality. Emma smiled. That sounds like the kind of trade that benefits everyone who deserves it. As I watched the construction crews begin, work on homes that would shelter families for generations, I thought about the house in Cherry Hills Village where Derek was probably having dinner with friends, and about the federal prison where Jessica was probably regretting the choices that had brought her there. Some people build futures, others try to steal them. The difference I'd learned isn't about intelligence or opportunity, it's about character. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.